The Transcontinental Railroad and Its Impact on Communication by Jonathan Shiroishi, Isaac Shiroishi, Quinton, Mendoza, and Dominico Ochoa. The Transcontinental Railroad was one of the most influential contributors of communication in the United States of America during the 19th century. It improved the economy by dramatically increasing interstate trade. It made travel and transportation for people and goods more efficient and cheaper. The Transcontinental Railroad helped many immigrants to spread across the United States, resulting in cultural diversity. It accelerated manifest destiny, the belief that American settlers were destined to expand across North America. The Transcontinental Railroad was built between 1863 and 1869. The man who first conceived this idea to start this massive project was named Theodore Judah. He saw the Sierra Nevadas mountain range and looked at it as an opportunity to connect the country in many ways. To undertake this massive feat, he still needed a generous amount of funding. Judah went to convince Charles Crocker, Leland Stanford, Mark Hopkins, and Collis Huntington, also known as the Big Four, to invest in his dream. It was still not enough money, so Judah and his investors went to President Abraham Lincoln to propose their idea. During this time, the Civil War between the Northern states and the Southern Confederate states was in full swing. The country was being torn apart by racial and economic division, and Abraham Lincoln was trying to ensure that it wouldn't. Lincoln approved because he believed the railroad would unite the country. And so, Lincoln signed the Railroad Act in 1862, granting Judah and his investors, the Central Pacific Railroad Company, as well as its competitor, the Union Pacific Railroad Company, the permission to build the railroad, as well as granting a certain amount of money in government bonds based on the difficulty of the terrain for every mile.
The Central Pacific Railroad Company started in San Francisco. On January 8, 1863, the Central Pacific started to work. However, the Central Pacific made slower progress than their counterparts because of their location. The Sierra Nevadas, while having to blow large tunnels through the mountains, the majority of the Central Pacific's workforce was Chinese. As a result of the signing of the Railroad Act, Abraham Lincoln founded the Union Pacific Company. However, he was assassinated before the company laid down their first track. The Union Pacific began building tracks and infrastructure in Omaha, Nebraska. Due to the Civil War, the Union Pacific Railroad didn't start working until July 1st, 1865. The Union Pacific was making more progress than the Central Pacific, as they had the wide open prairie to work with. Many of the Union Pacific Railroad workers were Irish and German. It was extremely dangerous to be a worker. These workers endured rocksides, avalanches, hostile Native American attacks, scary heights, mistimed explosions, and harsh temperatures. Many of them perished. Some avalanches were so bad that the people who were killed by them could not be dug out until spring.
Finally, on May 10, 1869, the two sides met on Promontory Summit, Utah for the final spike during ceremony. The two companies sent two of their most important people to drive in the spike, Thomas Durant and Leland Stanford. The festivities began with bands playing, people cheering, and Durant and Stanford helping themselves to several drinks. Then the time came for the final spike to be driven into the ground. According to a citizen who was at the ceremony, Alexander Tupence, then Stanford tried it again and tapped the spike. The telegraph operator had fixed their instrument so that the tap was reported in all the offices in the east and west. It was a feat many thought was impossible. When the final spike was driven into the ground, it was a telegram just a word long was sent. Done. The 6-year-long race was finished. North America was connected from coast to coast, and we were on our way to manifest destiny. When the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, the time it took to ship goods was greatly reduced. The Transcontinental Railroad made the transportation of people and goods much faster because it eliminated having to travel across difficult terrains such as mountains and canyons. The trains running on the railroad also didn't have to stop for hours to rest, eat, and drink, as opposed to if you traveled by wagon and some horses or cows. The Trains ran on coal and steam to move and therefore could travel continuously as long as they had a steady supply of those things. All of these contributed to the train's top speed of 60 miles per hour, which was 3 times faster than a wagon's top daily speed.
This allowed companies to ship their products in bulk in a short time. A fish caught in Boston on Monday might be in Colorado cooking in the furnace on Thursday. The economy boomed, and this signified that the United States no longer had to rely on other countries for goods, like a child turning into an adult by supporting themselves. A newspaper published in New York can now be read by another person who lived in Sacramento within a week, allowing that person to know what is happening on the other side of the country. This allowed people to communicate with each other faster than ever before. The Transcontinental Railroad also helped to convey ideas and culture as well. The immigrants that came to America could travel anywhere in the country thanks to the railroad. Along with them, they also brought their culture. In the East Coast, people were learning how to make dumplings, while on the West Coast, people were learning how to dance the polka. It was a big milestone for the construction of the culturally diverse country that we live in today. Because the Transcontinental Railroad was running through more unsettled parts of the United States, people were encouraged to follow Manifest Destiny, which was the idea that Americans were destined to settle North America. This growth in rural areas paved the way for outposts of trade and supplies. They also served as checkpoints for information and goods to funnel through. This made it easier for ideas and culture to spread as there was a constant stream of people coming in and out of these small towns. Overall, the Transcontinental Railroad greatly improved the way people lived back in the 19th century and onwards. What started as a vision and supported by the Big Four and President Lincoln had evolved into an amazing feat that connected the United States. It enabled people to travel more quickly and less expensively than in the past. It made it simpler and more rapid to deliver goods, and more importantly, it allowed Americans to interact with each other and share different objectives, thoughts, and values with one another. The Transcontinental Railroad left a footprint in our history that will never be forgotten.